In this chapter, we're going to explore the world of open source software. Now, this is a force that has become the absolute backbone of modern technology. It's running on our phones, our laptops, and the vast network of servers that make up the internet. But for all its importance, it often remains completely invisible to us.
I just love this analogy from the text. Think about that for a second. The plankton of computing. Just like the plankton in the ocean, which, produces so much of the oxygen we breathe, open source software is this microscopic, life-giving foundation for our entire digital world. We all depend on it every single day, but very few of us ever stop to think about where it actually comes from. So today, we're going to dive deep and take a much closer look.
Okay, so let's dive right in. Before we can really get a handle on how open source works, we need to clear up a few common myths. And these are the kinds of misconceptions that can trip up just about anyone, from students to even seasoned developers, when they first start to engage with this world.
Right. This is probably the biggest myth of them all. There's this persistent idea that if you have a project that's, struggling, you can just slap an open source label on it, release the code to the world, and boom, a community of developers will just magically appear out of thin air to fix all your problems.
And this quote just drives the point home perfectly. What's so interesting here is the context behind it. This comes from Jamie Zawinski, one of the early developers on the Mozilla project. The project that eventually gave us the Firefox browser. He learned firsthand that open sourcing a troubled project doesn't simplify things at all. In fact, it often adds a whole new layer of complexity. You have to clean up the code, you have to write documentation, set up communication channels, all of that before you see any kind of benefit. It's not magic, it is hard work. And this slide, I think, brilliantly illustrates the second myth, that only the code matters. You see, for developers who are already deep inside a project, it's really easy to get tunnel vision and focus only on the code itself. But for a newcomer, their first encounter is with everything that surrounds the code. They see the project's website, they try to read the documentation, they struggle with the installation process. If any of those things are messy or confusing, they'll likely just give up before they ever see a single line of code. That first impression is absolutely everything.
Another common fallacy is that open source projects just run themselves, that they're these leaderless, unmanaged, chaotic but creative spaces. Well, the reality is quite different. The most successful projects have active, though often very subtle, management. The goal isn't to give orders from on high, but to foster a healthy environment. It's about setting clear communication standards, making sure everyone feels welcome and that no one is marginalized, and really creating a community where people genuinely want to spend their free time.
And finally, there's the myth that you can just jump in without understanding the local culture. It's a lot like traveling to a new country. Over decades, a really distinct global culture has formed around open source development. It has its own unwritten rules, its own etiquette, and its own ideas about what's polite or rude. Just showing up without taking the time to understand this shared context, well, that's one of the quickest ways for a new contributor to fail.
So, if there's this powerful unwritten culture, where did it come from? That's the big question, isn't it? To really grasp it, we have to look back at its history. The way people interact in open source today is a direct result of the philosophical debates that really shaped its origins. Understanding this history is the key to navigating the community effectively.
So let's take a quick walk through history. In the very early days of computing, sharing code was just the norm. It helped sell the expensive hardware. But then, as software became more valuable in the 70s, companies started locking it down. This led to a counter-reaction, most famously led by Richard Stallman, who in 1983 started the GNU project to build a completely free operating system. Then, in 91, Linus Torvalds released his Linux kernel, which was the missing piece. And finally, in 98, the term open source was coined as a way to make all these ideas more acceptable to the business community.
This quote really captures the spirit that Richard Stallman was trying to preserve. He had worked in a lab at MIT with this really strong hacker ethic, where collaboration and sharing were just expected. It was a place where knowledge was treated as a common good. When he saw that world disappearing, his goal with the GNU project was basically to rebuild that collaborative community, but on a global scale.
So how did he do this? Well, his primary tool was this brilliant piece of legal engineering called the GNU General Public License, or the GPL. It's often called copyleft because it essentially flips the idea of copyright on its head. So instead of using copyright law to restrict sharing, the GPL uses it to enforce sharing. It sets a condition. You are free to use, study, and modify the software, but if you distribute your changes, you have to do it under the exact same copyleft terms. It was a way to guarantee that the software and all of its future versions would always remain free.
Now, as you can imagine, the word free created a lot of confusion. Did it mean free of cost, or free as in liberty? This led to the creation of this very famous saying to clarify the movement's core principle.
The focus was always on user freedom, the freedom to control your own technology, not on a $0 price tag.
And this distinction eventually led to a major split in how people talked about the movement. On one side, you have the free software camp, led by Stallman, which frames the issue in moral and ethical terms. It's all about user freedom. On the other side, you have the open source camp. They took a much more pragmatic approach. They argued that this collaborative model was simply a superior way to build high-quality software. It was a pitch designed to appeal directly to businesses. This split was crucial, as it allowed corporations to embrace the methodology of open development without necessarily adopting the ethical philosophy behind it.
And the Open Source Initiative, or OSI, was very explicit about this marketing-focused approach. This quote actually comes from their own website at the time. They saw themselves as a marketing campaign for free software. They believed the core product, the software itself, was a winner, but that the philosophical, sometimes anti-commercial framing was holding it back. By changing the label to open source, they made it so much more palatable to the corporate world they were trying to convince.
So despite these different philosophies, the moral argument versus the pragmatic one, a shared culture did emerge. And at the very heart of that culture is a core principle that governs how nearly every successful project operates today. And this brings us to the fundamental equation of open source culture. Your influence is directly proportional to your contribution. People need to feel that their voice in a project's direction is earned through the work they put in. It doesn't matter who you are, or who you work for, or what your personal philosophy is. Good work earns you a voice. This meritocratic ideal is really the glue that holds these huge, distributed, volunteer communities together.
So now that we've walked through the common myths and the foundational history, let's bring it all together. Here are the key ideas you should really take away from this explainer, especially if you're thinking about contributing to a project yourself someday.
Let's quickly recap our 4 key takeaways. First, always remember that open source is the invisible engine of our digital world. It's the essential plankton of computing. Second, success requires so much more than just good code. You have to focus on the newcomer's entire experience, and you have to actively manage your community. Third, understanding that historical split between the moral free software philosophy and the pragmatic open source business pitch is absolutely crucial for navigating the culture. And finally, the most important rule of all, influence is earned through contribution. It's a meritocracy built on work.
By understanding these concepts, you're no longer just a user of technology, you're actually equipped to be a creator within it. You have the cultural context, you have the unwritten rules, so the only question that remains is a personal one for you. What will you choose to build?